Greetings and welcome to our daily walk through the scriptures for April the 10th. Today is day 101 of your 1 year through the Bible. Great job. It takes a lot. I know that by now you've discovered that sometimes it can take a lot of work, and there are days when you miss it and you have to play catch up. Stick with it. Don't give up. 101 days. That's great job. Today's reading, you should have read Joshua chapter 3 and chapter 4. Luke chapter 14, 7 through 35, Psalm 80, 1 through 19, and Proverbs chapter 12, verses 27 and 28. Now, before we dive into our conversation in Luke today, I just wanted to make a little observation about Joshua chapter 3 and chapter 4. Hopefully, as you read this, your brain went and said, this seems really familiar. This is a really familiar scene. It is a really familiar scene, isn't it? What does it look like? Well, as we've been reading, hopefully your brain went back to the book of Exodus and realized this sounds just like the crossing of the Red Sea. Well, that's exactly what it sounds like, and that's exactly what it's supposed to mention, and it's supposed to bring to mind, because what you're seeing is this beautiful parallel. Remember, this is a generation of people that didn't necessarily see those miracles that brought you out of Egypt. They heard about it, and they might have been little kids at the time, but they wouldn't have had great memories of it. And so this is God reminding them, hey, I'm God over all of creation, including water. Now you say, what's the big deal? It's just a river. Okay, the Jordan River during the rainy season is pretty impressive. I mean, it's a seriously flooded river. So this wasn't just some little crossing. This was a big crossing, and especially to hold back an entire peoples. So it was really a beautiful miracle. So hopefully as you read it, you're starting to see some of these parallels and starting to see some of these cool things in Scripture. All right, so Luke chapter 14, Jesus gives several different conversations, and all of them really center around humility. Now, the definition of humility is to consider others better than yourself. And that really goes in the exact opposite of how we think, honestly. There is always somebody that we look at and we think, I'm better than you. And that's a very wrong and sinful way to think, but we are wrong and sinful people in a lot of ways. So what Jesus is telling us here is to show outwardly humility. And now, why is this important? Well, outward humility may not necessarily start reflecting what is going on inward, but constant practice of humility outward will eventually start to change your heart inward. God does both. God doesn't just expect us to live it outwardly. He wants it to be something that is genuine within us as well. And so he gives several different instances here of humility. One of them, he talks about don't try to find the place of honor. Don't go and sit, and there was a hierarchy at tables. And, it was one of those things where the most important people sat nearest the guest or nearest the host, and the least important sat farthest away. And Jesus is saying, don't assume you're the most important person in the room. As a matter of fact, assume everyone else is the most important person in the room. And that's a beautiful word for us. And then Jesus says, let somebody else exalt you. You don't need to exalt yourself. Let someone else do it for you. And he goes kind of talking about that as well in the great banquet, when he talks about how we need to treat others as valued guests. Okay, we need to treat other people as these beautiful, beautiful guests. If anyone comes to me, he wants them to be people that are of humility. But then Jesus makes a statement in verse 25, and you're like, wait a minute here, Jesus. If anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. Is Jesus really telling us to hate our family? No, he's not. But he is challenging us to understand what we value. What do we value in life? Do we value the opinions of others more than our God? Or do we value our God more than other people? See, here's the thing about it. If we're valuing God, we will value other people. If we value God, we will recognize what our place is in the pantheon of creation, and it's very tiny. I mean, we are exalted because God exalts us, not because we deserve to be exalted. And so then we therefore will treat others as it needs to be. We need to better understand what it is and why it is that we are following Jesus and how we do so. And that's what Jesus is saying here in these verses right here. He wants us to consider and understand what it means to follow Jesus. That means no longer considering ourselves worthy of things, but instead acting in humility, walking in humility, treating others better than ourselves. And that's a high cost sometimes. It's a high price to pay. All right, we'll talk more tomorrow.